Hello, boys and girls. I am coming back from court and traffic is essentially stopped because it is New Year's Eve and I don't know, what are you going to do? Bay Area traffic sucks balls. It's like 3 in the afternoon and I'm in Oakland-ish. Emeryville? I don't know. Anyway, I figured I'd while away a bit of the time talking to nobody in my car, because that's always a fun thing to do. I just watched, I was told to watch Constitutional Corner's Coffee and Chat. So it always amuses me that people think that I hate them, and I don't. I don't care enough about anybody in this community to hate them. It takes a lot of emotional intensity. You have to really have passion for somebody to hate them. It takes a lot of effort. There's people I disagree with. There's people I think are retarded. But hate, that's a really weird word to use for somebody that you've never met. Like an ex-wife, I'm sure you could hate an ex-wife or something like that, or the guy who stole your girlfriend, sure, I could get that, but hate, I don't hate. At least not, I don't know of anybody I really hate. I know people I dislike, but I don't know of anybody I really hate. But let's talk about my opinions and my feelings. It is my opinion, my personal opinion, my feeling, my belief, my passion, that you should have the right to record the gates of a military installation if you are not on that military installation, if you were on a traditional public forum, i.e. a sidewalk or a street that is not on that military base. I think you should have every right to film that gate. And my legal analysis backs that up. I believe I found one case that two cases that didn't look so good, I think, if I remember correctly. No, one case. It was one case out of, I think, the First Circuit. But it was a district court case, so it's not precedential. It's not even really persuasive. So it's my opinion and my legal opinion that filming a gate of a military base from a traditional public forum is and should be legal. So my opinion and my desire match up there. My legal opinion and my desire match up there. It is my desire that inland border patrol checkpoints should go away. It is my desire that they be found to be unconstitutional, a violation of the Fourth Amendment. In fact, all suspicionless search points, or all suspicionless searches, i.e. Drunk driving checkpoints, ID checkpoints, and inland border patrol checkpoints. And California has these checkpoints where they're agricultural checkpoints where they're supposed to see if you have any fruits in the car or something like that, because you're going to bring in bugs and pests. And I completely understand why they do it, but it is my opinion that they should be found to be violations of the Fourth Amendment and done away with. That is not, however, the current case law. Supreme Court seems to think that it's all just fucking fine. It's reasonable. Because the Fourth Amendment prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures, and the court found that the burden on the government for the inland border patrol checkpoints outweighs the imposition on the people, and it's easy, fast, and fun to go through those checkpoints, and even if they detain you, it's only for a minute or two, so no harm, no foul, and that's the state of the law. Now, can the law change? Sure. Is the law likely to change? No. No. It is precedent for a reason. The court rarely reverses itself. So if someone were to come to me and say, I want you to represent me for this Fourth Amendment violation, 1983 lawsuit because of this Inland Border Patrol checkpoint, I would say, look, this is a loser. I will be happy to fight it out for you, but it is a loser. I mean, if you want to try, if you want to put your money where your mouth is and go for it and try to overturn this law, absolutely, we'll do it. I'll put the best argument forward that I can, but I'm not going to lie to somebody and tell them they got a winner on their hands when it's a loser. The same thing with a lot of these things where I've come out and said that you don't have a right to film, i.e. in a courtroom. Unless there is some sort of a statute overriding the judge's prerogative, then the judge can, completely within the bounds of the First Amendment, because the Fifth Amendment, the courts have held that the Fifth Amendment overrides the First in a courtroom. The due process right, your due process overrides the judicial economy and decorum and things like that. It overrides the First Amendment. It just does. It just does. So when people say, you know, why can't you make an argument saying that, you know, it is, would, or should be allowed, it's because the likelihood of any argument that I make succeeding in a courtroom is somewhere between 0 and none. Does that mean if I had a client, I wouldn't do my best to defend them? I would make every argument I could think of. I would throw it all out there. Just hope and pray. But, you know, reality is reality. And case law is case law. And precedent is precedential. And statutes, unless they're unconstitutional, if the court's already ruled that statute is constitutional, there's not a lot you could do. You could say, well, as applied in this particular instance, maybe, but again, it's all about your odds of succeeding. If you have basically none, then I, as a responsible adult in the room, am going to tell you that particular action, that particular thing that you're doing that there is case law on is going to fail. Now, I think I've thrown out plenty of question marks on some of these things. Like, can the military control filming on the base? Well, we know that the military base is a non-public forum, and they probably can. But I qualify it. They probably can. Again, it still has to go through a test. There has to be a test. And the test is the restriction reasonable? And is it viewpoint neutral? That's it. It's just got to be reasonable. And what's reasonable to you isn't necessarily what the court would find to be reasonable. Because you could say, I just wanted to film on the military base. You could say, I just wanted to film I don't know, the architecture, right? And if there is a no filming policy on that base, the government could say, well, we have a no filming policy on the base because we don't want any spies to reconnoiter and, you know, figure out where our defenses are, where security cameras are. You know, we have sensitive things inside the buildings. We don't want them taking pictures of it to go home or go back to their country or whatever to search for weak points in our security. You're like, well, I'm not a spy, right? And you're probably telling the truth, because there are probably very few spies as a percentage of the world population. And so you might think that what you're wanting is completely reasonable, but what the court's going to look at is, well, is it reasonable for the military to have this rule to prevent filming on their base because of surreptitious activities of potential spies trying to figure out, are there long odds? Sure, but is it that important that the government have that kind of security? Yeah. And so, the court's likely going to find it's reasonable. But then again, if you go to an Air Force base to see the Blue Angels, and in the middle of a show, and you have your camera out and you're filming this show along with everybody else, number one, the military is probably not going to give two shits, because you're doing a normal activity. You're filming the air show. And if you're filming the crowd, or you're filming around where the crowd is, if you're where you're allowed to be and you're filming, it would be a lot harder for the military to make a reasonable argument that they should be able to outlaw your particular filming, because they're not outlawing anybody else, or they're not restricting anybody else's filming, and you're where they are. So anything that they could film, you could film, and anything you could film, they could film. So there is some fact analysis in there. So I think I've put caveats in a lot of these things. Like, can you film in a post office? Probably not. You have a high burden to prove. You have to prove the burden of proof in a non-public forum. The burden of proof is on the plaintiff in a 1983 lawsuit. It'd be on the plaintiff to prove that it is unreasonable, or it is not viewpoint neutral. And that's hard to do. Believe it or not, it's hard to do. The rule of thumb is the plaintiff would lose in that particular situation. And the reason why is because it's a very, very low burden for the government to show that it is in fact reasonable. But you have to prove it's not reasonable. That's hard. So can you film at a post office? Well, let's look at all the data. The data poster 7, if you actually read it, it says that you could only film under very specific circumstances. And one of those circumstances has to be that there's no prohibition from authorized personnel. So as soon as somebody tells you to stop, if there's no sign already, as soon as someone tells you to stop, then you got to stop. That's poster 7 telling you can't film, essentially. And you got to remember that there are other internal memoranda in the post office saying that you don't give permission to film. Your default answer is no, you cannot film. If you see someone filming, tell them they can't film, call the police, and let the police sort it out. So in looking at that, is it theoretically possible that a court would find that you do indeed have a First Amendment right to film in there? It's possible. Is it probable? No, it's highly improbable. It's a very low burden on the government to show it's reasonable. It's a very high burden on you to show that what the government is doing is unreasonable. And they deal with things in there. They deal with like passport issues. They deal with like people getting passports in the post offices. They deal with protected information like social security numbers, addresses, IDs, things like that. So it's a very low bar. It's a very low burden. Now, do I think you should be allowed to film? Well, personally, I filmed at a post office. I don't know if you guys saw that. It was the historical post office in Old Town Auburn. I asked if I could go in. The guy's like, yeah, no problem. He showed me around. It's no big deal. If it's no big deal, like, if you're not making a big deal about it, I know Desert Sentinel filmed inside a post office he asked permission and they gave it to him. He said, I want to film these stamps. And they're like, yeah, sure, go ahead, whatever. They don't care. If you're not being an asshole, I think 99% of the time they won't care. So do I think you should be allowed to film in the post office? Absolutely. As long as you're not being an asshole. As soon as you start being an asshole, as soon as you walk in there with a camcorder and make an ass out of yourself, you start making people uncomfortable, then I can completely see why they would find it reasonable to restrict filming, to restrict your filming in particular. Oh boy. Am I going to be able to come over? hard to do. Try to get over, kids. He's not making much ground. He might be heading towards the cause of this traffic. Highway patrol. Anyway, where were we? I don't even know. Yeah, so my opinion in a nutshell is that 99% of the time, the things that auditors are making a big deal out of aren't a big deal if you're not being an asshole, which is part of the reason why I think Men in Black had very little negative interaction with the police. It's why I've had no negative interactions with the police. It's why most of the, I don't think Desert Sentinels had any negative interaction with the police. If you're not an asshole and you're not making a big deal out of what you're doing, then it's probably not going to be an issue. Now, I can understand, are you within your rights to film a prison if you're on a traditional public forum? Again, my thought would be absolutely. You are well within your rights to do so. Should you be allowed to film? Absolutely, because as long as you're on a traditional public forum, I think it would be next to impossible for the government to say that there is a reasonable time, place, and manner restriction, barring something entirely unusual. Oh, that's a good thought. Let's think about what a possible time, place, and manner restriction would be. A reasonable time, place, and manner restriction on filming in public. What about outside of a courthouse if they were bringing in juvenile defendants? Like they had the bus come from the juvenile detention center with all the juvenile defendants, and they were going to bring those juvenile defendants into the court. I think at that point there would absolutely be a reasonable restriction against filming any of those child defendants, because they're minors and because we as a society have chosen to greatly protect them. And if a picture of them as a child defendant gets out into the wider public, while their childhood record may be sealed when they become an adult, that picture will never go away. And I think it is unfair, and as a society we have chosen to not do that to children, to hold a mistake made in childhood against them for the rest of their life. So there you go. So while what I say, a lot of this is coming because of what Maddie said, and she's right. I do take the role of prosecutor in these, and it's not because I want to see anybody prosecuted. It's because I want to point out to you what you will be facing in these if you persist. Like Mrs. Mac, Little Mac, if she gets prosecuted, she's toast. Like that's a plea bargain scenario, and plea bargain, blah, right? I'm getting railroaded into a plea bargain. Well, that might be the best way to get the least possible amount of jail time, etc. Her odds of winning it are pretty slim, as far as my understanding of everything that's going on in that particular situation. She just doesn't have a real good leg to stand on. It's a very poor case for her. So yes, I do take the role of prosecutor because you guys already want to believe that you know your rights, and I don't think you do. Honestly, most people don't in this community. Even though it's a mantra, know your rights, I don't think most people do. And you got to figure out where the cutoff is, where the line, the blurry line, gets a little too gray. So I don't think it does anybody any good for me to take the defense perspective on this, especially if it's a weak case, simply because you guys already believe it anyway, and I don't want to give anybody any false expectations, any false hopes. Well, I had an attorney tell me that I'm good if I do this. Well, maybe. And again, also a lot of things are very fact specific in these situations. So, taking one step off the side of the road onto a non-public forum can completely change the analysis. So there's a lot of nuance involved in some of this stuff, and so I more want to give you caution. My dad liked to tell stories. He liked to use analogies to teach me about life when I was a young man, and they stuck with me, and they were annoying as hell to hear because he said them over and over and over again. But they all boil down to basically you try to protect the people you love. You don't tell them to go out and take more risks. You tell them to be careful, to be cautious. One of his favorite stories is there was a king who lived on top of a hill with a very winding, narrow pathway running down along the side of a cliff, and he needed somebody to drive his carriage with his son in it every day down to school. I know it didn't make a lot of sense to me either, but whatever. And so he brought up 3 potential candidates, the 3 best carriage drivers in the land. And he asked the first one, what are your qualifications? And the guy said, you know what, I could drive with those carriage wheels 1 foot away from that cliffside the whole way down, no problem. And he asked the second guy, what are your qualifications? That guy's like, I could drive the whole way down with the carriage wheels 6 inches from that precipice, no problem. Yes, the third guy, what are your qualifications? The third guy said, I'm going to keep the carriage wheels as far away from that precipice as I possibly can to protect your son. Guess who got the job? So you might not like what I'm telling you, but I'm telling it to you for your own good. And I may not be right all the time. I'd still love to see the contradictory case law presented to me. I still have seen a dearth of actual case law that rebuts the points that I've made. But I still may not be right. But if you follow my advice, I guarantee you, I won't guarantee you, but I will say that you have a infinitesimally small chance of being convicted. And you have a very, very low chance of being arrested. I mean, it's still theoretically possible. I've seen people get arrested for filming on the sidewalk, and that's some fucked up bullshit. But everybody knows it's fucked up bullshit when it happens, so I don't have to give my 2 cents on that. Anyway, I'm getting up close to an accident scene, so I'm going to cut this off. It's probably long enough anyway. 23 minutes. Thanks for watching. And yes, I will be reasonable with people who are reasonable with me. I have no problem with that. I think everybody can see the difference in the various interactions that I've had with people like Pink and Teresa and Laura Shark compared to the interactions that I've had with even Eric Brandt. I think I had a reasonably good interaction with him compared to the interaction I've had with the round 1 with Maddie, and the interaction I had, at least initially, with Freeman. Yeah, that was a big one. All right, so thank you very much for watching. The road's opening up, so I'm going to get on moving. Have a wonderful new year, and don't drink and drive. You might hit a bump and spill your drink.